This week's episode is entitled Dark Clouds I Can See Through, and this is a metaphor of my own design and one that I have kind of built up over the years and one I wanted to share with you this week. Dark clouds I can see through. So let me break that phrase down into three parts. Dark clouds, first of all, let's talk about those. Dark clouds are a prevailing negative view of something. And I say prevailing because it's a dark cloud. Like if you're looking out your window right now, you can see it on the horizon. It's coming. It's big. It's probably making something wet. Everyone can see it. We can all point and say, wow, that is a dark cloud. So it's a prevailing view because it's a big cloud, but it's dark. People are worried. They're pessimistic. Something is not going to work out. Dark clouds I can see through. So that's the dark cloud part. By the way, I'll be giving 4 examples shortly attached to the stock market, but let me keep breaking down this phrase. Part number 2 of the phrase, I can see. And all I want to get across with that one is that what I see is what I see. It is the unique me. It's whatever I have built up over the course of time. It's my pattern recognition that I've built up by earning it over the years. And what you see is what you see. So when I talk this week about dark clouds I can see through, I'm going to be sharing some things that I've seen, but I'm not presuming that you should either agree with me or that you saw the same things. You may be seeing completely different things than I am right now, and I'm here to teach the mode of self-reliance. I'm here to say, yes, I validate your experience, your pattern recognition, and I'm encouraging you to act on it. Because when you're right, you'll feel a great sense of pride and authenticity that you acted on your own instinct. And if you're wrong, then you'll learn, I'm not always right. What can I learn from that? And you'll tweak and you'll get better. So far better for you to listen and learn and do your own thing based on what you hear on this podcast or anything at Fool.com than if you merely mimic me. So dark clouds that you can see, that I can see. And then the last part of that phrase is through. And what I mean by that is simply that even though there's a big cloud up there, and even though it's dark and everybody is looking at it, you're able to actually see through the cloud. In other words, in a pessimistic context, whatever it is, you're the optimist. You're the person who thinks that what's going to happen, what everybody thinks is going to happen, is actually going to be wildly better, wildly different from the not good tidings that you're hearing blurted around you. Dark clouds, you and I can see through. So why does this matter? And how do we attach this to the stock market? Well, in my experience, many of my best investments have been because I believed when the vast majority were not believing. So this is a fun podcast for me to do this week because I get to talk about the times I was right. I'm wrong all the time. We talked about that some other weeks, and we'll go back to that in future again. But I'm going to be talking about things that worked out when I was among a small minority. I hope you were with me. I bet you were for a few of these. I was in a small minority, and the headlines and the prevailing perception was that something bad was going to happen, but instead, you and I, we bought shares and we held. And the key here is that if you're right when the entire world was betting against you, you are going to make a lot of money if you leave that investment in. Because if you end up being right, slowly the world will start to realize that it was wrong and that you were right, and some of those people will start to buy that stock. And because there was such a huge prevailing negative perception of the stock, there are a lot of converts to be made over the succeeding years, sometimes decades. And so we hold those stocks because they were dark clouds that you and I could see through. So what are some examples? I have 4 this week. The first is e-commerce. Back in the day, rewind your clock back to 1996 or 7. One of my early television appearances was on CNN. It was actually on CNN Headline News, but they were doing a short interview in their tight 25-minute time frame, and it was going to be me coming back. In fact, they said, coming back, we're going to have David Gardner from something called the Motley Fool, and he thinks you will give your credit cards over the internet back after this. And that was the interview. I came on to be the guy. And this seemed crazy at the time, and if you were alive, I hope you remember this. It seemed crazy to a lot of people that e-commerce would work, that people would give their credit cards, this sounded scary, over the internet to buy something. And so, even though we were doing the same fool thing back then that we're doing now, which is mainly talking about the stock market and stocks, at that time, we were almost apologists for the medium itself. We were believers in online. In fact, with America Online, we were even pre-World Wide Web, but we were pro-web. And so we had that perspective that this medium, the internet, would be awesome. We had no idea of how awesome it truly has become now by 2016, how many solutions it creates for how many people across the world every day in how many contexts. There was no way to know it or see it back then. Gee whiz, Google wouldn't start for another 5 or 10 years, and Facebook wouldn't start for another 10 or 15 years. So really early on. And it was a dark cloud that we could see through, the prevailing negative perception of the internet. In our space, people were saying, well, people are hyping stocks in chat rooms. That was the big fear or worry, that this is all useless drivel discussion of stocks online, amounting to just mere chat in chat rooms. So we went on as the Motley Fool, my brother Tom, me, and a number of our advisors, people like Jeff Fisher, if you know Jeff and his work here at the Fool. We've been around for a couple decades now, and we were largely buying these companies, Amazon, eBay, AOL, and all of these ended up being the just tremendous stock investments of the next 10 years or so. 2001 certainly did hurt this group of so-called dot-coms a lot, and some, the weaker ones, never did come back, but really, the stocks that I continue to look back on, say, of my 10 best investments, 3 or 4 of them are right from that era, some of which, like Amazon, I still hold today. So that was a dark cloud that I could see through. I know I wasn't the only one. I hope you were seeing through it with me, too.
As always, people on this program may have interest in the stocks they talk about, and the Motley Fool may have formal recommendations for or against. So don't buy or sell stocks based solely on what you hear. Learn more about rule breaker investing at rbi.fool.com.